Many of the one-star ratings for Joker Folie à Deux are angry that Stephanie Germanotta isn't as hot as Margot Robbie. Robbie's Harley Quinn is one of the all-time great sex fantasies, up there with chainmail bikini Leia, supervillain as porn star. Stephanie Germanotta in her Lady Gaga alter ego laughs at these male sex fantasies about women. Her Harley Quinn is a depiction of what the real women under the makeup of our hypersexualized fantasies are actually like. And nothing makes us angrier than having our fantasies shown up as cheap. We've been living on a diet of force-fed fantasy for 20 years or more. Fantasies of muscular men in spandex and hot babes fighting evil wearing only a swimsuit. Fantasies of boy wizards, wars among the stars, games of thrones, post-apocalypses, and blue alien avatars. Computer-generated imagery made it possible to put our wildest fantasies on our screens, and we've been gorging on fantasy ever since. Then along came Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix to smuggle into a superhero franchise at the heart of our fantasies, a nugget of pure anti-fantasy. The Joker movies aren't realism. Sadly, the fate of the mentally ill in our society is sadder even than the life of Arthur Fleck. Instead, Joker and its sequels are stories about fantasy, how fantasy holds us in a powerful grip, and the cost of living in our fantasies. And like the collision of matter and antimatter, the collision of our fantasy-soaked culture with this anti-fantasy movie is explosive. Joker isn't a Joker movie. Gen Xers and millennials who remember Vertigo comics will know what Joker is. The Vertigo comics imprint was where DC let its best creators mess with its IP to remix Batman, Superman, and the rest of the Pantheon. Vertigo was formed after the success first of Alan Moore's Watchmen, 1985, Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, 1986, and Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, 1988. Moore, Miller, Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman, Garth Ennis, Warren Ellis, and a coterie of writers under editor Karen Berger rewrote the DC Pantheon and created new characters. Many of the best Vertigo-style comics deconstructed the fantasies of superhero comics into sophisticated anti-fantasies that confronted readers with what our fantasies really are. The second group of one-star reviews for the Joker movies are fanboys of Zack Snyder, enraged or just confused that Joker doesn't continue the absurd power fantasies of his reign over DC. The first Joker movie was the cinematic equivalent of a Vertigo comic. It was Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix rewriting the Joker archetype as an indie art house homage to Scorsese's Taxi Driver with a superhero budget that just happens to be called Joker. A movie about madness and civilization. Madness is the false punishment of a false solution, but by its own virtue it brings to light the real problem, which can then be truly resolved. Madness and Civilization by Michel Foucault is a history of how our society treats the insane. Foucault argues that madness and insanity are categories imposed by society on those at the bottom of society, in an act we now commonly call othering. The power structures of civilization are predatory, Foucault's critique argues, because it helps us deny our own role in this predatory system. We accept a fictional narrative in which the damaged victims of the system are cast as insane. Arthur Fleck is the lowest victim of civilization, an orphan adopted and then abused. He has no status, so fantasizes being adored by a chat show audience. He is not loved, so fantasizes a lover. He has no power, so fantasizes killing. A fantasy he then acts out. As Foucault argues, Arthur Fleck's fantasies are a false solution that offer no help with the reality of his plight. But calling the fantasies of the victim madness is also a false punishment. The first Joker movie is a carefully balanced dialectic between the forces of civilization and the victims of madness. It's deliberately uncertain whether Fleck is a victim to be pitied or a monster to be hated. Joker then goes a step further in its dialectic between madness and civilization. Arthur Fleck's fantasies not only bring to light his real problems, but begin to give Fleck real status and power as he adopts the fantasy persona of Joker. That, in the Joker sequel, will also give him the fantasy of love, as Folie à Deux dives deeper into the sick fantasies of our civilization. As Batman has become an ever more hilarious parade of good actors putting on a silly voice and cashing a paycheck, Joker is a role great actors actually want to play. Jack Nicholson's makeup-smeared mafiosi, Mark Hamill's shrieking sociopath, and, of course, Heath Ledger's seminal turn in The Dark Knight, all laid the groundwork for Joaquin Phoenix, the greatest actor of our generation, to make Joker into his kind of story. Phoenix is the face of the male victim, the little man broken by the world, who hears the lyrics to Folsom Prison Blues and thinks, "That's me." The Joker has become more and more the star of the Batman mythos, as we've started to realize that billionaire industrialists with delusions of grandiosity might not be the heroes we're looking for. Batman has always been fighting not just crime, but the criminally insane. And as we begin to deconstruct the fantasy of insanity used to other civilizations' victims, Batman looks less like a hero standing against crime and more like a vigilante hammer of justice coming down on the weak and downtrodden. And the Joker looks more and more like the rage, anger, violence, and destruction of the downtrodden when they finally stand up. The third category of one-star reviews for the Joker movies are people who dismiss them as incel movies. You get the distinct impression these people haven't seen the movies but are simply repeating talking points from the many think pieces attacking the movies on this basis. At a time of skyrocketing social inequality, it must be comforting for some people to dismiss all the young men alienated from the system and stuck in low-paid wage labor with the fantasy that they are all incels. Spoilers follow for Joker Folie à Deux. We have a perfect name for fantasy realized. It's called Nightmare, Slavoj Žižek. Arthur Fleck is finally allowed a moment of true heroism at the finale of Folie à Deux. Fleck's complex fantasies and his Joker persona have brought him the status and power he dreamed of, and Fleck can now see that his fantasies will bring him much, much more. Fleck has encountered what the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan called the symbolic order of civilization, that web of laws, institutions, status structures, and hierarchies that exist only symbolically by our communal agreement. And Fleck has discovered that the symbolic order of civilization can be reshaped by his fantasy. His Joker persona strikes the symbolic order in all its weakest places and threatens to shatter it. Given a public platform at his own trial, Joker has the power to incite the revolution of the downtrodden masses that could bring the civilization of Gotham crashing down. But Fleck finds the moral courage to let go of Joker and the power his fantasy can grant him, and in that moment becomes a better human than most of those who sit in judgment over him.
It was all just a fantasy.
There is no Joker. It's just me.
But Arthur Fleck's choice is also driven by the nightmare that awaits anyone unfortunate enough to actually realize our fantasies. In The Plague of Fantasies, the philosopher Slavoj Žižek catalogues the nightmarish collaborative fantasy that is modern capitalist civilization. Arthur Fleck's fantasies have manifested in what Žižek, an acolyte of Lacan, calls the impossible gaze. In the age of mass media, we fantasize ourselves through the gaze of a mediated audience. Sports, reality TV, chat shows. In becoming Joker, Arthur Fleck discovers that the crowd who cheer him turn out to be a crazed mob. The legal system that judges Joker is revealed to be just public theatre. The media, the prison and its guards, the reality of the impossible gaze he fantasized is a living nightmare. And the manic pixie dream girl that Arthur Fleck had always dreamed of finding turns out to be just another human playing out her own fantasy.
We're not going away, Arthur. All we had was the fantasy, and you gave up.
Stephanie Germanotta might be the only actor who could go toe-to-toe with Joaquin Phoenix in the depiction of insanity and victimhood intertwined. Lady Gaga is a deconstruction of the male gaze, displaying all the symbols of male sexual fantasy, then selectively amping them up to a repulsive absurdity. Germanotta's Harley Quinn is a performative fantasy put on just for Arthur Fleck. Lee, when we first meet her, is a Prozac Nation fantasy, the girl in the insane asylum, a constructed persona designed to seduce Joker. The real woman behind the fantasy is, by turns, broken, manipulative, lost, powerful, genuinely insane, and coldly realistic. The reason men so easily accept simplified fantasies of femininity is because the real human behind them is always unknowably complex. The anti-fantasy of Joker and its sequel are going to be two of the most hated superhero franchise movies for a long time to come. Audiences fat on our decades-long feast of CGI fantasies are never going to welcome the bitter taste of reality on our plate. But for anyone ready to think critically about the theme of fantasy itself, Joker and Folie à Deux are masterpieces of radical cinema, and a timely warning that civilizations which cannot face the madness of our conjoined fantasies will be overwhelmed by them.